Nice to meet you all. My name is Sagar Gupta. I'll be the moderator for today's panel on community engagement. And so I'd love to start off by just asking each of you to introduce yourself. So a little bit about you, maybe what's your name, your major, what year you're graduating, knowing that you all are students. And if there's any specific program that you would want to mention at the very beginning, feel free to mention that too. So starting off, Madison. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Madison Showmaker. I am a second-year student in the MA in Public Anthropology program. I graduate in May. Hopefully we still have a month, so we'll see if everything falls apart before then, but I'm planning on it at least. And I'm here to talk about my class I took last semester. It was Material Cultural Analysis and Interpretation. It was an archaeology class.
Hi, I'm Annie. I am a Clegg and Environmental Studies double major. I am graduating in May, so I have a month, knock on wood, everything works out. And I'm here to talk about the Community-Based Research Scholars Program.
Hi, I'm Maria. I'm a Justice Law Criminology and Business Administration student, graduating in May 2026, and I'm here to talk about my Core 105 experience.
Hi, I'm Georgia. I am a master's student at SIS International Development Program, also graduating this May, and I'm going to be talking about the Alternative Break Program.
I'm Callista. I'm studying international relations, and I am going to talk about an internship that I've done at CARECEN, the Central American Resource Center, I've been volunteering with them for almost 2 years, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about my experience working with the organization.
And congratulations to the three of you who are graduating this upcoming semester. That's really fantastic. It's something you should be really proud of, and I'm sure that when it comes to your next steps and hopefully how experiential learning and community engagement has come into play in terms of affecting maybe what it is that post-graduation looks like, or if it just left you with any lessons that your traditional experience might have not left you with, then I'd love to hear about that towards a little bit of the end when we have some more time. But to those who are listening, my name is Sagar Gupta. Again, I'm with the Center for Leadership and Community Engagement, and what we oversee are quite a few of the programs, some of which were already mentioned, whether it was community-based courses like with RIA, with the some of the internship opportunities with nonprofits, as well as alternative breaks, and our programs like the Community Service Learning Program and the community-based courses. So I know each of you all highlighted a different opportunity that kind of introduced you to experiential learning. How'd you hear about that, and tell me a little bit more about what you did within it and how that kind of contributed to your that year of your college experience?
Sure. So I found out about this course. It's a course within the anthropology department. There's only so many courses offered there. I had also done an archaeology field school over the summer, and so I wanted to explore that a little bit more, and there was this methods class, checks the requirement. I wasn't expecting it to be as hands-on as it was, but I was really pleasantly surprised. So the final project that we worked toward the whole semester was to put an archaeological exhibit in the library here. We didn't originally know it was going to be in the library. We had to figure out where we wanted it. It's on Winnipeg Junction, so it's a railroad boom town in Minnesota at the turn of the century, 19th to the 20th century. It was a wonderful experience. We really did. You talked in the last, the opening panel of Learn, Do, Reflect, and we really did that. We visited different museums in Alexandria to kind of get a feel of how they do their community-based research, and then also how they make it really accessible to the public. We did a lot of research through the Smithsonian on how they make their research accessible, and then we obviously had to do a lot of archival and archaeological research on Winnipeg Junction to bring it all together. We built the exhibit, everything, with the help of the library staff, of course, who are amazing. We got it done. And then afterwards we had kind of a launch party where we organized a panel, and the students who put it together got to reflect on the experience, and we got to invite the community to come see what we did. It was really great.
So I guess before we ask that same sort of question to the other panelists, I kind of have a follow-up, which is, what did you expect? I know you mentioned you didn't see or go into it thinking that it was going to be so hands-on. What was it that you expected going into the experience?
Well, it was called, the class was Material Cultural Analysis and Interpretation, and having done the digging part of archaeology, I was just expecting this to learn how to do cataloging, cleaning, and then maybe some archival research, but the added aspect of like, we want to connect this with people in the community. Another thing to add is that it's a traveling exhibit, so we printed it on foam board. That way it can be loaded up and taken to Minnesota and shown to people who live around Winnipeg Junction now, whose grandparents might have lived there. So that's a really important aspect of the community engagement. So I really like that it was connected to people who live there. And also everyone here got to learn a little bit about what we were working on all semester.
And I guess one more question. So what was your reaction when you kind of realized, oh, there's going to be all these other hands-on experiences? It was a little bit different than what I originally had gone in thinking it was going to be like. Were you how'd you feel about that? Were you surprised? Was it something you were excited for, a mixture of both?
I was really excited. I'm interested in working in museums. So I, in part, took the class because I was interested in the cataloging and analysis aspect of archaeology. But then being able to put it in the museum or exhibit context was like a bonus. I'm also pretty bossy, so the fact that it was a mixed undergrad-grad class. And so I got to take on a little bit of a leadership role in terms of the planning, and I just naturally really liked that. So.
Really cool. So Annie, tell us a little bit more around your experiential learning opportunity and what came up, like how'd you hear about it, and tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, sure. So I heard about the community-based research scholars because I'm not gonna lie, I really wanted to live on campus, and I knew that housing was going to be competitive. And so I was looking for a way to get guaranteed housing. How was I going to do that? Well, there were two options. There was either honors or there was community-based research scholars. And I've always wanted to work in nonprofits. I'm from Illinois, and I'm from a portion of Illinois that has a very strong interest in working in the corporate sector. And I just didn't really want to work in the corporate sector. So I was very interested in exploring this avenue of what it would be like to work in a nonprofit. And I've been very interested in that. And when I read some of the testimonials on the CBRS website, when I, did some more digging into it, I realized that I wanted something really hands-on and applied, and that the community-based research scholars was going to give me that. So the other part of the question, I think, was what I expected.
Yeah.
So I expected the program to be very hands-on. I knew going into it that I was going to be doing a lot of communications, and that I was going to have to be very assertive in what I wanted from this internship portion of the program, and that I was going to have to make the program was going to be what I made it. And so I sort of had this expectation of, well, I'm going to have to sort of communicate to a bunch of different people my needs, and these people are going to have different backgrounds, and I'm really interested in exploring that. And I was very fortunate to have been placed in the Latin American Youth Center, where I actually was able to communicate with people from different backgrounds in a subject that I've always been really interested in, which is food waste and sort of nutrition. And this sort of goes into I'm an environmental studies major, and that's like sort of a separate thing, but this experience was really able to catapult my passion into the planet and studying the planet as an interdisciplinary source rather than as a science that's only a science. I was able to understand the communications portion of that when I joined community-based research scholars.
Great, thank you. And feel free to go ahead with what was your community engagement experience like, and what did you expect going into it?
So the course I was enrolled in was Core 105, which was Doing Better at Doing Good. And I originally chose the course because I was very big in philanthropy in high school, and coming into college I was a freshman, so wanted to gain more volunteer experience. So overall, it was very beneficial. I would say I didn't expect a lot that I gained from it. I kind of just expected to do volunteer work, philanthropy work like I had done before, but it was a very different environment because I was volunteering down at Horton's Kids, my first time volunteering with children, which was very awesome, and I loved it so much that I continued doing it outside of the course.
And had you ever taken a class before that kind of connected with community engagement in that way?
I had not, so it was definitely the first time I had at least like learned about those kinds of courses, and definitely was able to apply some of the learning in class during volunteering and then vice versa.
And that was with Professor Chaka, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
What was the kind of training going into it, or how did you as a class, who most of you maybe have never worked with kids before, or seen the DC community going into, Ward 8 where Horton's Kids is, what was some of the maybe fears going into it, and what was the training like, and how did that help with feeling more comfortable with the experience you were about to get?
I would say one of my largest fears was not being able to connect with the students. I had never worked with kids before, let alone kids of a different demographic than me. So it was really interesting kind of just to like get that experience, and it's kind of going back to like experiential learning. You have to experience it to know how to like deal with it. So we had like trauma-informed trainings and other types of trainings that Horton's Kids actually required us to attend. But I would say most of the learning that I had done was in person, like actually volunteering with the children.
Thank you. And then Georgia, what was your community engagement experience like?
Yeah, so I found out about the Alternatives Break program in a very kind of unclimactic way, of just through email. I was sent an email. It was like, apply to be an alternative break leader.
People are still reading those,
Yeah. Well, I actually read my emails, so I was able to benefit from that. So I applied because since I'm a master's student, I've already finished my undergraduate degree, and I went to a very small liberal arts college that had an alternative break office. So I was familiar with the program, and I knew kind of what it does. And between undergrad and grad school, of course, there's a pandemic, but after that, I had been able to do some like field experience where I led experiential education programs in Hawaii and the Dominican Republic, where I was like in the field, like in very remote areas, like stuck with a group of young people for like days and months at a time. So I was very much familiar with kind of living in that way, and I loved like the challenge of it and how I changed as a person and how many like cultural things it taught me. So I knew that like alternative break was something that I wanted to do that gave me more freedom to like design something from scratch. So a lot of these programs that I worked, essentially there was an itinerary that was built, and then you were just hired as a leader, and then you just kind of had to follow their schedule and like whatever kind of goals that they had. And I found alternative break to be an opportunity where I have like, I'm in the driver's seat and I can design like exactly what I want with the learning objectives that I want. So going into it, there was a little blurb that said that they were giving preference to domestic trips. So I have a really big passion for Latin America, and of course there's a huge Latin kind of influence in the United States. But I knew, since technically it was domestic, I had never been to Puerto Rico before, and I did know a lot about the island, and I wanted to use it as well, both as a leadership experience, but as a learning experience for me through building this program, to learn more about it. And I did. I mean, I think about it all the time, and I feel like I've really built a large kind of volume of knowledge of like the things that are going on there. So I decided to choose Puerto Rico also because I had heard in the news that this was back in my first semester when I started at AU. In September was Hurricane Fiona had just struck the island. And although it didn't hit the scale that Maria did, it still, was making headlines in the news, and people were without power and kind of all the things that happened after a hurricane. So I knew that this was kind of an issue that I think deserved more attention through an experiential education program. So that was kind of my initial exposure to it. And then as I started, after I was accepted and my program was like set to run, and I was planning it, I learned there's a lot more nuance to the whole, like all of the socioeconomic issues that are going in Puerto Rico that's not necessarily related to hurricane relief, but rather the mismanagement of hurricane relief is a result of a lot of these other socioeconomic institutions that are going on. So it was a great experience, and I didn't think that I would be sitting here right now because I just like clicked this apply button for alternative break.
I'm so glad that you read that email.
Yeah.
I'm curious actually about you mentioned during your undergraduate time when you had kind of participated in something akin to all breaks, there was growth that you felt like you experienced during it. Was any of that something that you tried to pull in when you were designing the experience for your trip? And if so, how'd you go about doing that?
Yeah, I think we definitely made an effort to make it like a trip that encompassed a lot of different modalities, both physical and mental, emotional. So for me, and what we've discussed multiple times already, is like reflection is a huge part of service learning and experiential education. So you can do the stuff, but if you don't sit down and process what you just did, then of course you make the impact to whatever community you're serving, but you yourself don't really process what just happened. So I think that was like a huge thing that I brought from my professional experience working in the field that I really wanted to incorporate in the program, of doing scheduled meetings where we'd sit down as a group and really like discuss how we're feeling and how we're doing as a group. Also just like challenging yourself physically. So we planned a bike tour. So we actually had to get on bikes and like bike around, and it was pretty precarious because the pavement and things are not the same as we have here in the mainland US. So we also did a lot of time where did some hiking and things like that. So I think a combination of like emotional reflection as well as like physical components is what was my intention to make it like a challenging and fulfilling trip.
Yeah, I think all of the times you get someone outside of their comfort zone, they come back into their comfort zone feeling like that's a little expanded and like there's a new kind of piece of themselves that maybe they found. And so really cool that you were able to give that experience in a way that was kind of half domestic, half international. And I believe, Callista, you went to Puerto Rico pretty recently, right? Or where was your conference most recent?
We went to Puerto Rico.
Together?
Yeah, together.
Oh,
yeah,
great.
And
So
presented it.
tell us a little bit more about your experience, not necessarily with Puerto Rico, but with the internship that you had, and maybe what was on your mind as you were going through either that trip or just with the internship.
So I want to give credit to Sagar because I was actually through the Community Service Learning program on campus that last year, which was my freshman year undergrad, that I found out about the opportunity to do community service, I guess outside of American University, and connect with communities and initiatives that are, not directly related to the university. So there's an hours requirement for that add-on credit that I had to fulfill. So given that I have an interest in specifically kind of like what Georgia was mentioning, but on the Latin American community in the DMV area, I decided that I wanted to maybe look into some organizations that were helping empower the Latino community in the DMV. So I actually found through some brief research that I did, I stumbled upon the Central American Resource Center, and they have they've been around since the 80s, they have an amazing grassroots program that gives immigrants access to legal services. So for permanent residents, they have a citizenship program so that people can we help them fill out their citizenship applications and get prepared for their interview with U.S. Customs and Immigration Services. So there are and then there's a housing department as well. So they have all of these different kind of offices within the organization that focus on empowering and helping specifically the immigrant community in the DMV area. And, it doesn't necessarily, they don't have to be just Central American immigrants who are being helped. Their doors are open to anyone. So I found the organization and I decided, that I wanted to reach out and see if they had volunteer opportunities, and I did that, and I ended up going and to Caresen, and they were kind of showing me around and decided to kind of put me in the role of being like a volunteer facilitator for these classes for immigrants who were preparing for their citizenship interview. And so I kind of was just thrown into it. It wasn't really something where it was like, I knew that before I went what my volunteer work is going to look like. And it was very nerve-wracking at first because I was in front of a class of probably around between 10 and 20 students, guiding the class in Spanish, which is not my first language, so.
In your first year of college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit intimidating because, I mean, and again, like, it was something that, I guess to answer the second part of your question, which is like, what were my expectations going into the experience? I didn't really have any expectations. I think I was more curious about learning what the organization did and who the clients were, who, the community of clients and employees there. So I would say I didn't really have necessarily a set expectation, but I started with that experience, and it kind of it totally transformed, I guess, the way that I kind of, how do I explain it? Like, it transformed the way that I envisioned a service learning experience to look like. Because I didn't really envision myself like facilitating a class like that, or even having like
being in the driver's seat.
Yeah, exactly. And also not really having like deep personal connections with, and again, like, I didn't view it as like, I didn't view it as an opportunity to really get to know, I thought maybe I would do something more administrative, but I really got to know the students in the class that I was facilitating, and those personal connections were just so powerful that I think that was what made the experience to me, the CSLP experience, so impactful, and that it was those personal connections, I think.
Something that kind of brings to my mind, and switching at this point, feel free to just chime in. We'll do this more open style. But what was an experience, or what do you feel like was maybe the most memorable part of your experience, something that, looking back on it, reflection removed, you're going to be like, okay, 5 years from now, I'm probably still going to remember that moment?
I would say for the exhibit we put in was seeing it all put together. Especially the people who were drawn to this class that was hands-on, because even if none of us knew we were going to be putting an exhibit together, we did know that we were going to be handling archaeology and all had that interest. I remember being surprised that it was so collaborative, in that even though I said that I'm assertive, I still wasn't doing all the work. Like, we all were working together, and it surprised me a little bit in how well we worked together. And so we were all doing research, and then I designed what the panels were going to look like, and then someone else was handling actually getting the artifacts ready and cataloging them. And then we just had these different teams. And then when we were all there and we put the last like piece of garland across the sign and stood back, it was like, we really did this together. And that was probably what I'll remember. And close follow-up is trying to decide the name of the exhibit. And then we kind of had like the ball of red yarn out, and we're like trying to connect the dots to everything we talked about to come up with just one
Look like
line.
you're solving a murder for a little
Yeah,
bit.
exactly. And then we changed.
What name did you land on?
I think Winnipeg Junction, or Spirit. Oh, here it is. Spirits of the Past: Archaeology of a Ghost Town.
Ooh,
Wow,
that's
that's
fun.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. That also sounds like it could have been a murder mystery too.
Is it still in the library?
No, we tore it down in March, but I think that it might be traveling on its way to Minnesota. Not for sure, but it's equipped to do so, so I hope so.
I'm sad I missed it.
We have pictures.
Anything memorable from anyone else that they would want to share? Otherwise, I will.
Yeah, so I remember when I was in the Latin American Youth Center one day, and I remember, I will give you a little background by saying that I'm a planner. And I like to have, when
I got
I'm
that
in,
from the staying on campus and what's the strategy to get there.
yeah, when I'm one semester in, I want to start thinking about the next semester a month or two before. And I remember I was feeling really grateful about my experience at LAYC. And I was thinking to myself, like how am I going to maintain this relationship? I was thinking about, I have this really awesome opportunity to work with a nonprofit that I didn't even know existed in a field that I think I want to go into. How would I maintain that relationship? What would that look like? And I remember that, because I've never really done anything like CBRS before. I had never really done experiential learning. I just knew it was going to work Like, it was what was going to work best for me and for my brain. And I got to LAYC, and I was talking with Julia, and we were cleaning up. And I was like, hey, Julia, you know, like, I'm really grateful that I've had this opportunity.
And Julia is your site
Yeah,
supervisor?
and Julia is my supervisor. Yes. Yeah, thank you
Shout
for.
out to Julie Kahn, she's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm so grateful that, like, I had this opportunity to work with you. Like, thank you so much for taking the time to sort of take me under your wing and answer my questions, and sort of like just let me, like, ask basically anything that I want to ask, and, like, make and sort of mold this program. And I was like, thank you so much. And she was like, yeah, like, if you ever need a space to come back to when, like at any point throughout your college career or outside of college, like, we're here. And I just remember thinking to myself that was, like, she didn't have to offer that space to me after I had finished my program. That she didn't have to do that. She was done with the part of it that was, like, an obligation.
Yeah.
And that it really meant a lot to me to know that I had a spot that I could go to outside of AU and sort of in the DC community, and that, like, that was the first moment, I think, where I was like, oh, I'm not just, like, a student at AU, I'm also a member of DC.
Absolutely.
And that sort of got me to be a bit more optimistic about the people in DC, and that sort of that conversation got me to start trying new things outside of my comfort zone. Back to what we were talking about, the comfort zone. You know, you have this small circle and it grows into a bigger circle, but it's, like, slightly smaller when you go back into it. Like, that was sort of a huge moment for me where I was like, well, maybe I could start stepping out of my comfort zone a little bit more, because it worked out really well.
Yeah.
So that, I think, for me was a moment that I'll remember fondly.
That's cool, finding that community even when you didn't go into it with that expectation, and then feeling like even more at home with where you already were. I'm curious, are there any other moments or memories? Because this is one that, if there's anything to stand out, I just want to give the space.
I can touch on that. At Horton's Kids, I tutor, like, 3rd grade to 5th graders, and one of the most memorable experiences I have is seeing the progress reports from the students that I'm tutoring. You never, like, I didn't expect them to grow in, like, exponentially, but just seeing that, like, from semester to semester, the students that I was working with have been growing and have been learning a lot, and that really was reassuring to me, knowing that I was helping them in their, like, literacy skills, and just seeing, like, they do point systems, so seeing, like, their points go up from, like, 50 to 60, it's not a huge jump, but it's still, like, a considerable amount to me, knowing that I was able to help them and make a difference.
Absolutely, and I think that is, that's a big amount. It's something that without the proper support maybe wouldn't have happened. And one of the things I think is unique about your experience that you've shared so far is, like, you started off doing it within the structured approach, continued to do it on as a volunteer role, and you felt like at both of those times you were still being able to see your impact being made.
Yeah, definitely. I would say even continuing with that, like, from semester to semester, I've been doing it for 3 semesters now.
Wow.
So from semester to semester, I'm working with the same kids, so I'm able to build those relationships with them. But not only that, I'm able to help them in school, outside of school, like, help them deal with bullies within Horton's Kids, and even, like, during school. So it's always lovely to see them, like, excited to see me, and I'm equally as excited to see them.
Yeah, it sounds like one of the common threads that I'm hearing is that everyone kind of came in, maybe a little curious, and then realized, and this is kind of one of the senses you get with nonprofits, especially around DC, is that there's so much going on that you need to be able to forge your own path. It's a community of leaders in that way, and people who are all trying to find out, how can I pick up this to take it forward. So you maybe all had to find your own ways and roles to do that. And then you were able to see now, well, this is maybe what I came in with, wanting to explore something more academically or more around my passion areas, and now I'm leaving with seeing not only myself having been improved, but the way that I've been able to also, like, give back to others. I think that oftentimes when people think of community service or community engagement, they only think of that in terms of that one-way street of, oh, I'm going to go into this community, I'm going to serve, I'm going to help, but I'm fine where I wasn't going to get anything out of it. And sometimes this, like, reciprocal nature of it is what's most important. So I guess my question is, when it comes to either, the DC community or something around your academic interest, what was something that you felt more connected to or more comfortable with, after your experience, that you maybe didn't anticipate going into it?
I think there's a lot. It's hard to choose one. But if I can kind of go backwards from the class I took and talk about a different AU experiential learning moment.
Absolutely.
I mentioned that I did an archaeological field school last summer. I went to Ireland for a month. In there, I spent a month with a family, living with them, and it was doing community-based archaeology. So actually, the project we were doing, the couple I was staying with had been participating as members of the community, excavating their own ancient past, which was really interesting.
So like
and-
oral histories, or like more archaeology, I guess, in that sense, where it's, you said digging up and stuff?
Yeah, literally digging.
Wow.
And they would come to the site with us occasionally and just check out what's going on, because they're really invested in their past. So I won't go into the history because I'll talk
We could
forever.
do the whole session on that, yeah.
It was so incredible to be in the field for maybe 6 or 7 hours during the day, digging and excavating, and then going back, and one of the woman who was there would cook us dinner, and then we'd sit and talk about like what we found, and they'd give us the context of the history and stuff that they know, and then we'd share, like we found a dice one day, and then we were talking about, whimsy of the past and just being able to contextualize it in that way, and actually knowing not just the people where we were, but knowing the place that we were. And I feel like I got a really deep connection.
And it sounds like that deep connection part, it was like, for you personally, were you in that place of your life where you were like, I've always been interested in this type of subject, but it kind of brought it to life in a way where you're like, okay, now I know this is kind of really what I'm wanting to do with the next few years?
Definitely. I was interested in Irish history, but being there and we went to a lot of museums, and then we learned even outside of museums, things that, people from Ireland learn in school, but not necessarily other people really privy to. And
Yeah. What about for others? What was that impact that, was made on you, or that you felt like was made within the communities that you were working with, that stood out to you, or that you didn't really anticipate going in?
I can speak to
Yeah.
that. So I think a lot of the alternative break models that exist, I think when one thinks about it, your mind automatically goes to like traveling all the way to the global south, which is, obviously we have a lot of programs that are going to Africa and Latin America, which is fine, but I think it's important to always like question kind of that motivation as to why you want to go that far away in order to like learn something profound about, like, of course there's always something to learn, I'm not like discounting that, but I think what my experience taught me in Puerto Rico is that you don't need to go all the way to all these other continents to be able to like discover that, and that I had that mindset I didn't even know that I had when I originally went into the program with the idea of like hurricane relief, because when I thought of it I said, okay, Puerto Rico just had this hurricane, like I'm going to think logically they need help, so like they probably need people to go there and like rebuild their houses and stuff, and that's a pretty straightforward program that I can plan, where we go there, we partner with some NGOs, and we like fix people's roofs and things like that. And as I was starting to go through the process and I started learning as to like why Puerto Rico is having all these socioeconomic issues, it's like, okay, well, it's because like we technically own them because they're a territory of the US, and this is causing all these other issues. So I myself caught myself in this kind of like white saviorist mentality of like, I need to plan this program so I can help these people. And when all things were said and done at the end, before we had departed, the program looked a lot different. It was more so focused on like community development initiatives. But I think that really solidified in my mind when I got there and we were having these conversations with the community stakeholders, because they were telling us like, we don't need your help. Like, we have all of the resources that we can possibly need to be able to like reconstruct and like do whatever like we visited communities that essentially like built their entire electrical grid by themselves, so they don't rely on like the municipal electricity. So it's not like these people are not like, they might be under-resourced in some things because of US policy, but they're not dumb. Like they have their own resources and they know how to innovate. And by us going as an American group to like go and help them or fix something, I think is inherently wrong. So with the idea of reciprocation that we've talked about, I think what the program really taught me that I brought back to the US is that sometimes like service learning doesn't really necessarily require you to do any sort of work, like physical labor. And I think that's like the image that everyone always imagines when they say like I'm going on a service trip or an alt break or like experiential learning, there's always that physical aspect. What Puerto Rico really needed in solidarity from us is like our support and awareness from like a political and like legislative perspective, because like their situation will continue to perpetuate as long as the institutions exist in Washington that are causing them to be essentially a neo-colony. So honestly, with the perspective of Puerto Rico, like the service really starts when you get back to Washington.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because that's where you have the most impact.
And it may not be the thing that like you would look at as that clear photo op or something, right? Like people,
Yeah.
I think, go in with that mind of service, and this is one where even the marketing is kind of weird, because if we market service in this certain way, people are going to come to expect that as the only idea of service. And so it's also, I think, about how can we make even the marketing around service learning one that's responsive to the fact that it is community-centered, community-based. Knowing that we have about like 5 minutes left, I have a question that's definitely on my mind, and it's one that I ask with the intention of knowing that AU has a really unique program that could provide some support with this. But as you're doing your community, like one of the things that's really unique about community engagement work is the fact that all of you all have started off with some sort of community-based component, right? Actually, not just going into the community, assuming that you know what they need, but going there, being open-minded, and then seeing where you fit in, asking the right questions, and gathering information that way. When you think about your most recent community engagement experience, do you have any, ideas or projects that you've either, thought of yourself or have come up with in collaboration with community that you think you would eventually, or if you had the right resources, would want to implement? And that's a question I want to hear from or a response I would love to hear from everyone if you have something to share. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to jump in if anyone
No,
else does.
absolutely.
But no, when you said that last part, I thought of something, because I know at Caresen, in the citizenship office specifically, there is a need for volunteers who are trained in how to fill out the applications for citizenship and screenings for new clients. But that obviously takes training and obviously time. That would be time that the employees usually would spend having to train volunteers and go through that process. But something that I've been thinking of developing, and I've been kind of toying with the idea in my mind, but it's like some kind of system that would recruit interested volunteers. And there are so many students here at AU who are interested in working with organizations like Caresen, who would be able to do group trainings. So they would go basically and I've talked actually about this with my site supervisor there, who works, he manages the citizenship department, but there could be some kind of opportunity for volunteers to go, whether it's a Wednesday or Saturday, and they spend that entire day in training to learn how to fill out these applications, do interviews and screenings, and then with that knowledge they can actually see clients, and obviously still under the supervision of the lawyers, and like no paperwork, obviously all the paperwork has to be reviewed and everything before it's sent out. But with that training and knowledge, especially in a group setting, they can make a pretty big impact and take some of the load off the employees at the nonprofit, so that they don't have to do all of these screenings and manage all of these applications.
That's fantastic. And
Yeah.
what comes to mind for me on that too is the fact that one of our powers as a higher educational institution is all of our amazing faculty, and that a faculty member could be a great resource for being a trainer or facilitator. So yeah, other things that have come up, or ideas that you have in terms of how you would want to engage at a higher level, maybe with your community partner.
I can touch on that.
Yeah.
Something that I've realized, I didn't really talk about it much, but my time working with Horton's kids, I realized, and I got more comfortable with my identity, like myself, and I would love to start some sort of initiative to increase like cultural awareness and cultural competence within not only just like the children but the other volunteers. That can either look like a cultural exhibition, like hearing from different people of different backgrounds, and I think that'd be very beneficial for like everyone involved in the organization, volunteers, administrators,
Absolutely.
and like the students. And I think
So they don't have to like maybe wait until they're at a point of college to finally get the exposure to kind of all of the diverse communities that we have here.
yeah, and I think DC is like an incredibly diverse area, and like just being able to see like where other people come from, at least to me, is really interesting, and I hope it's also interesting to them. But like I like to take time out of my day to like talk to them about where I'm from, because a lot of them just like assume that I'm like white from America, but I'm like ethnically I'm not. So it's nice being able to tell them about like where my heritage is from and like what that's like, having a heritage outside the United States.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great one. Yeah, others?
Yeah, so I think I can touch on that a little bit. So I'm working with earthday.org. My focus in this is on environmental communications. It's an awesome internship. It's been very informative. One of the most informative parts of it has been communicating with different members of staff, because I've communicated with my boss, who is the communication interns manager. I've communicated with the Department of Outreach, with the Department of Education. I've communicated with a lot of different people. And when I'm in communication with them, I got this prompt from my internship course. And he said to me, one of the questions you have to ask to see if this thing that you're doing is worth your time is, what is your end goal? And I would love to implement a travel program. And this travel program would be all around DC, because some of the stuff that we do is we write articles on things that are going on in the environment. And DC, I believe, is a leader in sustainability in America. And I think that a travel program in which people from earthday.org could act as investigative journalists and go behind the scenes on different nonprofits that earthday.org and American University has connections with would be extremely beneficial to interns who are in person in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just because it draws that connection to the community. I have this personal belief that people should be off of their laptops and technology, unless it's for class, for a paper. But otherwise, I believe that the world is sort of outside of your phone, and that DC is one of those places where there's so much happening. There's so much actually happening, like action-wise. Instead of talking about things, people intentionally do things.
Yeah.
They do things and they get backlash for them, but they do them. And that because we are in that space, we should be utilizing that to advocate for our interests. And that earthday.org has, a couple of campaigns. We have the Canopy Project and the End Plastics campaign. These are the two that I've worked on. It would be really interesting to find the resources in DC that directly apply to that, and then doing like case studies. And because my office I'm in the DC office, but we have offices, we have offices in different places, like globally. It'd be very interesting to tie that to culture as well, and do sort of an interaction with the Earth Day people in India and talk with them about what they're doing in terms of the campaigns and in terms of their actions.
Yeah, because it sounds like even from that sense, like when you brought up this idea of almost like standpoint epistemology, right? Like how do you know what you know right now in this sort of digital global age? Like there's so much information out there, and you never know what is, just like how any research methodologies are, what is really giving you a very pure stance. So having that lived experience oftentimes will allow you to see that. And within a profession that most likely is so heavily involved in research, getting that opportunity to be in person and seeing things yourself and getting more ideas and creating that community is probably a pretty good one. Love to hear from Georgia and Madison too, and then real quick, knowing we only have 2 minutes, part of the motivation behind asking a question like this is that American University has a really cool program. It was actually created by students. It's completely funded from the class after the tragedies of 9/11. They wanted a way to figure out how they could give back. They created the first student-led endowment in the US, where essentially they raised money between their class, $100,000, and we used the interest that's come off of that fund for over 20 years to fund projects of up to $1,000 that undergraduate or graduate students are eligible for. You can apply for it as an individual, as a club. You get a year to use that grant funding, and you even do community-based research within it so that you know your project is going to have what's the end goal and what's your budget looking like, what's how are you evaluating the impact, and who do you need to partner with to make it happen. So all of you all are eligible for it. We have 2 grant cycles a year, and the next one's coming up in a few months. So you can always reach out to Eagle Endowment at american.edu if you want to apply for that grant. You have a mentor who's with you for the full year to help you execute that as well. Yeah.
I think I'm still in my reflection stage in terms of kind of working through how to bring research and the archive together with community-based research, but also public accessibility. Those are all things that are kind of floating around in my mind. But something that I do find interesting, especially based on what you just said, because I'm unfamiliar with that endowment, but I was thinking, I'm a first-generation college student, and I've had a lot of experiential learning experience, I guess, throughout my, I went to community college, then university, and now I'm here. And I think just making opportunities more visible, and if this is something I can help with, whether by being a mentor after I graduate, like an alumni mentor or something, I would love to do that. I've also thought, when you asked about clubs, I'm in the Graduate Student Council for the College of Arts and Sciences, and I ran out of time here, but I would love to see an endowment for first-generation college students, specifically to leave the country. I wasn't able to, even though I wanted to do anthropology and I wanted to leave the country, and that was my passion. I'd never done it before, and I didn't have any of the tools or opportunities to do it until after I graduated from my undergrad.
I think that's something where we're looking to partner with some Greek organizations too, because right now they do a lot of philanthropy, and that separation between philanthropy and actually doing community engagement work is a big one. So potentially that's one where our new first generation Greek organization could be one of the leaders in creating the fund through the Eagle Endowment. We could match that grant or something like that, and then it would provide the mentorship and the funding to do so. I think we have time, Georgia.
Yeah, I'll try and be quick.
Yeah.
Thinking about it, I don't know if I personally have a lot of power to implement my idea, but thinking about my whole experience, I think continuity is very important, especially with the alternative break program. I do think that the ideal alternative break program is that you have solidified programs that just run every year, and that you build an ongoing relationship with these civil society organizations rather than allowing students to just design a whole new program every single year. Although that's great that AU can have a larger global reach, I do think that it does perpetuate to a certain extent of just going somewhere, doing whatever your program's about, and then leaving and kind of forgetting about the experience. Of course, I know that's kind of dramatic, but I think to a certain extent, if you are constantly going to all these different places all over the world and it's a very short-term turnaround, it might diminish that impact. So perhaps
I'll be responsive as well as long-lasting with our
Yeah, I do think that's an administrative kind of thing that I'm leaving, so I don't know if I have a lot of power. I have my colleague Callista who will be here for a moment. So maybe I'll break the fourth wall and address the camera, and hopefully maybe this will reach administration somewhere. But it would make me sad that of all the work that I put into designing this program, that a year, 2-3 years down the line, it just never runs again. So that is something that I've been thinking about these rich experiences that I've built with these community partners, I truly adore them so much, and to think that, and they have been constantly telling Callista and I, when are you going to bring another group? And it makes me sad to think of there needs to be someone who spearheads the trip in order for it to happen, and the fact that administration doesn't spearhead that on behalf of the students, I think sometimes can lead to that.
Yeah, and
disconnect.
there is the value, like you said, in it coming from students too. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate all of you all for your time of being able to share about your experience too, and then hopefully this is your a little platform to also get the word out to those who are next, whether they're students or whether it's the next generation of the team or the AU community itself. So again, thank you all so much for your time, and thank you all for being in attendance.